Good day, everyone. HighRoad Solution is pleased to present this online webinar entitled The U, What You Need to Know About the Canadian Anti-Spam Law. Our speaker for this presentation today is Jenny Lassi. My name is Jeff Baker, and I will be your moderator for today's seminar. Today's presentation will last approximately 60 minutes and include a specific question and answer period at the end of the session. You may enter a question by typing it into the web conference system in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen and then clicking the call-out button or hitting enter on your keypad. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. If you have any technical questions during the event, the conference is now being recorded. Please email support@highroadsolution.com. Today's webinar is being recorded and all participant lines will be muted during the live program. Jenny Lassi has been affiliated with HighRoad Solution for 7 years, first as a client and then as an employee. With experience handling deployments and deliverability for a wide range of clients with optimized recipient engagement top of mind, Jenny routinely troubleshoots deliverability issues from ISP-level filtering to email client-level filtering, email forensic as she refers to them. She also consults with clients on authentication, content strategy, email preference center management, and other deliverability optimization tactics. And with that, I would now like to turn the webinar over to Jenny.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is designed to be a high-level overview of CASL and CASL compliance that demystifies the legislation, reducing the fear of compliance, and helps associations understand next steps in an easy and consumable way. So this information is not intended to advise you from a legal perspective. I just wanted to say that right up front. We are not lawyers, so we will advise you on a high level of what you need to do. You will need to consult with your own legal department if you do have one. However, on the last slide of the presentation, we do have contact information for a legal CASL expert, Melissa Fitzgerald from Gryphon. And HighRoad Solution has partnered with her on CASL issues, so if you don't have an internal legal department or counsel, we do highly recommend Ms. Fitzgerald, as you may choose to retain her for either help with your own legal department or consult her for CASL. She can be a resource. Okay. So today's webinar, we're going to just understand at a high level what is CASL, what is CAN spam, and how do the two compare, and will your organization's e-messaging be impacted by CASL? If impacted, what can you do to be in compliance? And at the end, there are additional references and resources. Okay, so what is CASL? Essentially, it's Canadian's anti-spam legislation, or otherwise known as Canadian anti-spam law. It goes into effect on July 1st. So July 1st is when you need to be in compliance. So you have approximately 5 months from now to do what you can to be in compliance. That should be plenty of time. We do recommend you get started soon. So what will CASL do in theory? So the legislation is written in efforts to reduce the amount of spam emails that reach your inbox. So to give power to the enforcement agencies to penalize offenders and reduce the need for other spam reduction efforts like email server filtering software that costs organizations thousands in software licensing and the manpower to manage updates and that sort of thing. So it's really designed to combat spam in a way that's enforceable. Okay, just some fast facts here. So in general, it prohibits sending commercial e-messaging without the recipient's express consent. And you'll hear the term express consent a lot throughout this presentation. And that includes messages to email addresses and social networking accounts and SMS text messages sent to a cell phone. Just for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to focus more on email, and email does apply to many different aspects like social media, but we're going to focus on your email marketing. CASL prohibits the alteration of transmission data in an electronic message, which results in the message being delivered to a different destination without express consent. This is basically changing an email address from one thing to the other, or email forwarding in an automated way. So It also prohibits the installation of computer programs without express consent. So that's like malware, that sort of thing, ad-serving malware. Prohibits using false or misleading representations online in the promotion of products or services. It also prohibits the collection of personal information through accessing a computer system in violation of federal law. It also prohibits the collection of electronic addresses by the use of computer programs or the use of addresses without permission. So basically, address harvesting and address scraping. So CASL Basics for Email. Essentially, this is an opt-in legislation, and it permits email marketers to send commercial electronic messages only to recipients who have asked for them or otherwise given consent to receive them specifically from your organization. Okay? Express or explicit consent. Membership or subscription sign-up collects consent, date, time, and email address. E-newsletter subscription sign-up collects consent, date, time, and email address. So those methods of express consent are acceptable. Okay? There's also what you might have heard of implied consent. So CASL does have language that speaks to implied consent if express consent was not obtained but a previous relationship exists between the sender and recipient. Okay, so CASL language does give 2 years to gain express consent if you have implied consent. Now, implied consent is a little bit more in the gray area, and so you will need to consult with your own legal team to see if the relationship would be considered a existing business relationship or other relationship, like a membership relationship, that would be implied consent. Okay, so what is required? That was my first question when I was researching this legislation, is what does this express consent really mean? Like what's required? So to obtain express consent, the email sender must clearly describe the purpose for requesting consent, provide the name of the person seeking consent, and identify on whose behalf consent is sought, if different, and provide contact information for either those persons, so mailing address, telephone number, email address, web address, and indicate that the recipient can unsubscribe. Okay, so in essence, if you're collecting information or collecting, somebody signing up for membership, there's language on your page. It's describing that, as part of their membership, they will be receiving these email communications. And if by hitting, either submit or selecting a checkbox, that means they agree. Once they do submit, you are getting express consent. If that submit is collecting a date and time stamp, okay, that's associated with that record somehow, either in your AMS or your email platform, and also the email address. Okay. So the enforcement agencies for CASL, there's 3 government agencies responsible for enforcement of the law. So what's different and unique about CASL is that, the enforcement agencies, in theory, are going to enforce this, whereas CAN-SPAM, there's been some lawsuits and that have come to fruition. However, a lot of the spam just goes unpenalized. So the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, so the CRTC, they issue administrative monetary penalties for violations of the new anti-spam law. Okay, there's also the Competition Bureau to seek administrative monetary penalties or criminal sanctions under the Competition Act, and the Office of the Privacy Commissioner to exercise new powers under an amended Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. Okay, so there's 3 government agencies. Now, just to kind of differentiate between CAN-SPAM, okay, because everybody knows, kind of in general what CAN-SPAM is. There's been some kind of back and forth in the association space of, okay, if we have, membership, do we need to adhere to CAN-SPAM and that sort of thing. So the CAN-SPAM Act of 2003 was signed into law by President Bush on December 16, 2003, and establishes the United States' first national standards for sending commercial email and requires the Federal Trade Commission to enforce its provisions. So the basics, it's essentially an opt-out legislation, whereas CASL is an opt-in legislation. CASL, you need to opt in to receive communications. With CAN-SPAM, it's kind of the opposite in that you can send anyone an email in theory, as long as you have a way for them to unsubscribe. That is the determining factor if your email is CAN-SPAM compliant. Okay, so it's an opt-out legislation, and it permits email marketers to send unsolicited commercial email as long as it adheres to 3 basic types of compliance defined by the CAN-SPAM Act: unsubscribe, content, and sending behavior compliance. Okay, so unsubscribe, an unsubscribe mechanism present in all emails. That's what I think we all know and understand CAN-SPAM to be. There's also opt-out requests that are honored within 10 business days. So if you don't have a way to automatically unsubscribe your recipients, if you're doing a more manual process, you do have 10 business days to be in compliant without being susceptible to a possible penalty. And opt-out lists that are only used for compliance purposes. So if you are, writing maybe opt-outs to a segment or maybe like an interest area in your AMS, this really is really important because you'll need to make sure that all of those lists are always suppressed from any sends. So you don't inadvertently email market to anyone that has gone out of their way to say, I no longer want to receive emails from you. Okay. Content compliance, accurately friendly from names, relevant subject lines. So the subject line has to represent what's actually the content that's in the email message itself, and a label if content is adult in nature. Okay. Also the sending behavior, physical address of the publisher, advertiser, or other contact information should be somewhere in the template or in the footer. A message cannot be sent to a harvested email address. Okay. Cannot contain a false header. So the header is that little text that's at the very, very top of an email that might say, view online, or to ensure deliverability, please add us to your safe list. People do use that header or that pre-header information to communicate, maybe like a 20% off sale or something along those lines. So it needs to be accurate to the email content as well. The email should contain at least 1 sentence. Okay. This is important because a lot of email marketers, if they don't have an HTML email message and they just have an image that's on that email, and for some reason if somebody has image blocking on their email client by default, so they're not seeing anything unless they do download the graphics. To them it appears like a blank message with a little image placeholder with a little red X in it. So I do recommend that if you do use images solely in your email, please just put 1 sentence at the bottom, even if it's just a, to view this email online or in your browser, click here, something like that. An email cannot be null or blank. Okay, this is important. Text versions are still best practices, so you do want to make sure that if somebody inadvertently is sent a text version, that email that they receive is not null or blank. Okay, and the exemptions for CAN-SPAM compliance is transactional messages. Transactional messages, by definition, would be receipts, registration confirmation, that sort of thing. So something that happens as a result of a transaction that the recipient has done. Their transactional messages do not need to have an unsubscribe mechanism. Okay. Also, relationship messages. Okay, so how does CASL differ from CAN-SPAM? CASL requires express consent or opt-in from Canadian subscribers. Okay. CAN-SPAM requires an unsubscribe mechanism in email sent to U.S. subscribers, or any subscribers for that matter. CASL has opt-in legislation, whereas CAN-SPAM has opt-out legislation. Okay. CASL cannot send email without permission to Canadian subscribers, and the CAN-SPAM differs because you can send without permission if you allow a recipient to unsubscribe. That is changing. So any Canadian subscribers that you have in your database, you will need to gain permission in order to send email to them. Okay, simply being CAN-SPAM compliant is not good enough anymore for Canadian subscribers as of July 1st. Okay, so CASL also has an exemption for personal or family relationships as well as existing business relationships, customer types of relationships. CAN-SPAM you can send to anyone as long as you allow them to unsubscribe. Okay. Now, how is CASL similar to CAN-SPAM? Okay. Transactional messages are exempt from express consent rule and also exempt from the unsubscribe rule. So CAN-SPAM, you can always send transactional messages, and they are exempt from the unsubscribe rule. Now, I do recommend, I'm going to interject my 2 cents in here every once in a while, but I do recommend utilizing your transaction messages to allow people to sign up, since transaction messages are able to go out to people as a result of a transaction. If those people are not subscribed to your newsletters, a transaction message template ideally should include a way for them to subscribe. That's just a way of you getting an email through to them and enticing them to subscribe. Otherwise, they may not know how to. Okay. Refer a friend and forward to a friend methods of sending email are exempt from the express consent rule, and that's because those actions are not under your control. So obviously, it's not you trying to spam somebody if one of your recipients is trying to share your content with one of their colleagues. Okay, so refer a friend and forward to a friend methods of email sending are exempt unless they the forward to a friend or refer a friend happens to result in a sign up, and that in the process of that sign up, you are receiving express consent from that new recipient. So it is a way, having both refer a friend and forward to a friend method on your email, in your email marketing, is a great way to expand your brand really beyond your own membership base. Okay, and then emails required by law are exempt, which is the same in the CAN-SPAM. So you can send any email, including legal notices, product recall, safety information. So it's really a way of communicating legal information to a recipient that is required for them to see. Okay, so it can be, in many cases, the class action lawsuits, product recalls. If you are, registered a product or, registered some products that you purchased, if those are recalled and they do have your information, they can use it to contact you. Okay. So will your organization be impacted? Yes, if you send emails to Canadian email addresses with or without your knowledge. Yes, if you do not know if your existing business or non-business relationship with the recipient means you have express consent, implied consent, or no consent. Okay. Yes, if your membership sign-up does not clearly communicate that they consent to receiving emails from your organization as part of their membership. Yes, if you allow non-members to subscribe to your available e-newsletters and you do not have a date and time stamp of the subscription submit. Okay. No, if you collected express permission from all members and non-members when signing up, or all non-members when they subscribe to available newsletters. Okay. You only send transaction messages and no marketing or commercial email. I don't think anyone falls into that category, but if you're just purely a product or store and people are only receiving transaction messages from you as a result of their transaction, you're not impacted. You obtained express consent under other privacy legislation prior to CASL going into effect on July 1st. That's important if you had express consent or implied consent under PPIDA, and you do have the ability to keep your express consent. Or if you had implied consent, you do have a certain amount of time to get express consent after July 1st. Okay, so if you are impacted or think you may be, what do you do now? You act. And like I said, you have approximately 5 months to begin becoming compliant. So where should you start? Okay, the first place to start is to audit your membership sign-up process. Okay, so if people are logging onto your website or other shopping cart solution, when they are signing up for membership, is there clear language that states on there that by their membership, they are consenting to receiving emails from you? I know a lot of associations that we consult with and create integrations with. The default behavior is that every member receives all of their e-communications right out of the gate until they come to their email preference center and deselect or unsubscribe from one or more of those available e-newsletters. But right out of the gate, they get everything, and then the person has to actually select what they no longer want. Now, if the membership sign-up form is very transparent of the different emails that are, or it can be pretty vague in that you will receive all available e-newsletters by signing up for membership. You don't need to necessarily list out each one that your organization sends. Okay, and then also look at the way non-members and prospects, if you do allow people to sign up for your e-newsletters, if it's that open, when they are signing up for the e-newsletters, what you have to audit that process. Okay, and is there language on there that says, by clicking submit or signing up, you are authorizing us to send emails to you? Okay, now this can help not only for Canadian subscribers, but also for list hygiene from your U.S. or global subscribers as well. And also do a data audit. So taking a look at all of the records that you have in your database, either your email marketing database, your AMS, or both. Look and identify the Canadian email addresses that end in CA. Now that's going to give you a general number. Not all Canadian email addresses end in .ca. There might be some ambiguity between, like Hotmail, and there might be somebody that happens to live in Canada that has a regular Hotmail address versus Canadian Hotmail address. So there are some gray areas there. But also, if you are collecting country as a field in either your membership sign-up process or when somebody's signing up for a newsletter, that's important information too. And if you don't currently have country exposed as one of your required fields upon sign-up, I highly suggest that become a required field when people are signing up, simply because you will need to know what country they are from. Specifically, if they're from Canada, then you need to make sure that you're getting express consent. Okay, so we have, HighRoad has a few Canadian clients, and we know that they probably have the most Canadian email addresses in their database. Okay, so U.S. associations I'm sure have many Canadian email addresses, but they're not probably as impacted as an actual association that's based in Canada. So I did a case study on our client, and our client's a member-driven organization based in Toronto, or Toronto, as they say. They analyzed their membership sign-up process and non-member e-newsletter subscription process and determined that they had express consent from members, okay? But their legal department did not feel that they had express consent from non-members, even though non-members subscribed to emails, and this could be construed as a prior business relationship that had implied consent. But they didn't feel that was taking them, being as transparent as possible. So they decided to deploy an email message to non-members in last May to drive non-members to give express consent by logging into their online subscription portal, okay, and giving permission to continue to send them email. So they sent out a very generic letter. I mean, it's not graphically, there are no graphics really. It was purely text, and it was a Dear John letter, or not a Dear John letter, but a Dear Subscriber letter that said, this is who we are, this is what's going on with canned spam, this is what we need to do, and then gave them the steps for their call to action. Okay, this was sent to over 45,000 non-members. Okay, they had a couple different versions, one French and one English. They had an 80% delivery rate. And this is interesting because of non-members, non-members are the least likely to give you their updated email information when their email address changes. So the fact that 20% bounced does not surprise me in the least. Obviously, I'm come from the data and deliverability mindset, so I like to see delivery rates north of 90%, but that's just not realistic. For non-members, they're churn and burn over email addresses, so 80% is something very typical, okay? The open rate was almost 30%, and the click rate was almost 50%. So, but the click rate is of the open rate, okay? So of the 29 or 0.7% of people that did open it, 49.23% of them clicked through. Okay, so we're kind of whittling down the numbers here. And so once they were driven to the landing page to log in and give permission and update their email preferences, approximately, so 6,597 non-members were driven to the re-permission landing page, okay, of the original 45,000. Okay, all non-members who did not respond were scrubbed from the email marketing database and flagged in the AMS as do not contact by email. Okay, they might not necessarily want to scrub everyone out of their database simply because they may need to keep those records open for other compliance reasons, or maybe they're still sending them direct mail. That sort of thing. But from an email perspective, they are scrubbed. They will no longer receive emails from them. So important to note that, okay, so if the typical response rate for a survey or any kind of call to action, it really varies, and it varies on the organization. But in general, I like to say or aim for 30% of those that clicked, okay? So if we're looking at 30% of those that clicked, then we're talking about 1,979 people, so roughly 4.4% of the original list. So that's a big chunk. So if it's only getting through to roughly 2,000 people of the 45,000, that you're essentially scrubbing out 43,000 email addresses from your email marketing database, and that's okay. It will happen. It kind of seems like a lot. Your organization probably, if you're not based in Canada, you won't see those numbers, hopefully. But just to know that the typical response rate for any kind of permission campaign would be about 30%. Okay. All right. So the re-permission campaign. The example that I gave you was a re-permission campaign. So I'm not sure if your organization has thought about what it could do to re-permission some of these subscribers, Canadian subscribers in your database that you may not have express consent or implied consent, or if you have implied consent, you may still want to do a re-permission campaign to gain express consent, since you can do that. So whether you didn't collect express consent for your members at the time of sign-up or your non-members at the time of their e-newsletter subscription process, there are tools you can use in your email platform to re-permission subscribers. Now, obviously, this depends on the platform that you use. In general, HighRoad, we have a couple different email platforms that we do use, and this is possible with both. So hopefully it is with yours as well if you're not using one of our platforms. So the step one is to identify and segment which subscribers are affected. So you can do a search for any email addresses that end in .ca, and also review your subscription process to see what data is captured at the time of sign up. So maybe you don't have country as a field at, that was required at sign up, but maybe you do have their province and the postal code. Okay, then you could make some assumptions based on that data. So if your association automatically sends emails to all that sign up for membership, have your legal department review the language on the page. And if it does communicate to them that they will receive emails by submitting or applying for membership, they consent to receiving these emails at the time of submit. A date and time stamp is saved. If not, then you will need to re-permission these subscribers. Step two, create a segment and also have a list export of all of those affected, okay? you will need to deploy an email to these subscribers to drive them to the landing page to collect permission. If this landing page is on a repermissioning system you've built, like maybe perhaps inside your AMS, your subscription process, then you can skip all the next steps and go grab some coffee and listen to my jibber jabber. But if you use your email platform sign-up widget that's hosted on a landing page, you have a few more steps. Okay, so in many email platforms, they have like either a sign-up form built in as well as sign-up widgets that you can create, and the widget will give you a little snippet of code that you then place on one of your web pages. And what that does is it has a little field and a submit button. So in the back end of that, if somebody enters their email address and hits submit, that email address is automatically added to a segment inside your email marketing database. Okay. Now the front end of that, on the web page that you place the snippet of code on, you will want to clearly communicate in your language that they are being re-permissioned, or they are giving you express consent to send emails to them. Okay, so step 3 is create the sign-up widget and host on your landing page. So in essence, you'll have the sign-up widget put all subscribers, or all the Canadian subscribers you're reaching out to in this re-permission campaign, into a segment you might call, or segment or list, you might call Canadian permission, right? And you put that widget code on the landing page. You drive the subscribers to the landing page. When you do this, the email platform should track the date and time of the submit as well as the IP address. That's just extra. The IP address is gravy, but I like to err on the safe side, and I know our platform does track the IP address of that submit. It would be a good idea to collect that. Is it required? No. Okay. Note, every platform handles this a bit differently, so test if subscribers need to be deleted from your account just after you deploy the email, so when they're reintroduced, the system tracks the date and time. So I know our platform tracks the date and time that somebody entered the email database, and then it also tracks the last modified. So if the record was modified in any way, they were added to different segments, they were brought in to, via an integration, or maybe some of the fields were updated, anything that was modified about that subscriber profile, it would be in the last modified date and timestamp. At this time, double opt-in, or DOI, is not a CASL requirement. So I found that to be interesting, because if somebody's newly signing up, hitting a confirmation link certainly doesn't hurt, but if they're already going to a form to sign up, that would just be extra. That's not necessary. Also, if you have an email preference center application that functions as a subscription sign-up form, this could also be utilized to obtain express consent for a re-permissioning campaign. So if you already have a way for people to sign up, we could add additional text on that page and drive people to it to maybe select another checkbox that indicates that they understand that they're a Canadian subscriber and they are giving you express consent. So that is an option as well. The re-permissioning campaign using the sign-up widget, that's something that your organization can do right out of the box, right out of the gate, without involving any other agencies. It's completely up to you. If you need help, however, creating a landing page, because you don't have internal resources to do so, feel free to reach out to us or your email service provider professional services team. Okay. Now, before you send, just my 2 cents, and that's my little baby girl demanding more money from the swear jar from Grandpa. But I thought it was an interesting picture. But just simply to highlight that this deployment is important. Okay, so you need to make sure you've done everything you possibly can to reach an inbox. I come from the deliverability arena, and this is kind of my area of expertise. But so permission and re-permission campaigns, in general, it's probably not going to have the response rate that you would ideally like to have. Okay, but if your emails are getting routed to the spam folders or going missing, because your deliverability is not where it should be, basically you're wasting money. You're just throwing money into the wind. And for the same reason I don't gamble, I hate throwing money away. So I'm the frugal email marketer. So deliverability checklist, make sure that you have DKIM and SPF authentication in place. If you don't know what that is, contact your provider and they can counsel you on it. Most platforms do offer the ability for you to be authenticated. Basically, that's just a digital signature that says you are who you say you are. So emails are coming from you, and people are able to receive them. A lot of ISPs, they filter. If you do not have DKIM in place, for instance, Gmail, if you don't have DKIM in place, your emails are going directly into the spam folder. There's nothing you can do about it, okay, except for putting DKIM in place. Reach out to us if you have any questions on that. We have a lot of documentation on our website, as well as other deliverability webinars that are available online that you can access to learn more about that. Okay. Also send email traffic on a warm IP. So if you're currently sending more sporadic, I highly recommend warming up that IP address with a little bit of traffic before you're sending your repermissioning campaign. That's simply because a lot of senders that might send, 50,000 one week, and then there's days that go by, they don't deploy anything, and then they send another big burst. ISPs take notice of that because those behaviors are indicative of spammers usually. So we do recommend breaking up that traffic into steady and consistent bits of traffic. Make sure that IP is nice and warm before you're sending your repermissioning campaign. Okay. Also manage the bounce logs and address the root issues of bounces and redeploy to those bounces once you have resolved any issues. So if you take a look at your bounce log, so using our client case study for an example, they had a 20% bounce rate. Well, of those bounces, you should be taking a look at the bounce logs to see what that bounce reason was and the bounce code. Because if it's a spam content or spam block or mail block, any sort of block that the domain you're sending to is blocking you for reason A, B, and C, you need to do what you can to resolve that. Sometimes it's just as easy as sending postmaster and abuse at an email that is requesting them to whitelist your domain and IP address, saying you're reaching out to members that have signed up for your, or non-members have signed up for your email communications, and they're blocking your traffic and you're getting complaints or something along those lines. And if they do whitelist you, then do take those email addresses that previously bounced and redeploy that repermissioning campaign to them. Okay. So some best practices and takeaways from this webinar. So you'll definitely want to work with your legal team to isolate and segment affected subscribers. Okay? Member-driven organizations may have implied consent for members, but consult your legal team to define these requirements for you. Update existing member sign-up processes and non-member subscription processes to obtain express consent if you don't already have it. Start now to deploy a repermission campaign to Canadian email subscribers if you don't have express consent. You will need to capture date, time, email address to prove express consent at the time of sign-up or repermission. And take permissioning a step further and collect the IP address of the submit location. Okay. With that, just a couple housekeeping items too. I just wanted to, before we get into the Q&A, just know that there are references and resources here at the end of the presentation, and these will be sent to everybody that is attending or registered for this webinar. So any questions?
And now is the time for the Q&A segment of our webinar today. Your participation is key, so please don't be afraid to ask any questions. Again, you can ask the question via the web conference system by typing it into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen and then clicking the call-out button or hitting enter on your keyboard. All right. First question, was actually about the DKIM. You said there was some other information or other resources for that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. On our HighRoad Solution website, under articles, we do have several articles written under data and deliverability that talk about the deliverability basics. And so it's a two-part article, and both parts talk about DKIM. There's several links in there as well as some PDF documentation that you can. But basically it's domain key identified mail. It's a way of authenticating that you are who you say you are. And this very, very quick process that actually many organizations think is a little bit more complicated than it is, but bottom line is you tell your email service provider what domain you're using in your account to send from. So for instance, we are HighRoadSolution.com. We are sending email from communications@HighRoadSolution.com. We had DKIM keys for HighRoadSolution.com. Okay, right? So if we deployed emails on behalf of any other domains, we would need to go through this process multiple times. However, so we had generated these little text records, and it's just a little string of text, and we went into our DNS and added the text record. It takes literally 2 minutes to add the text records. And once those text records are added, the client lets us know that, okay, we just added those, and we literally flip the switch, and it's working, okay? It's very fast. So hopefully your email service provider, if you're not using one of our platforms, allows you to do this. Some of the smaller ESPs don't, which means that you're going to have labored deliverability to the big ISPs, the Yahoos, the Gmails, for sure the Gmail, the MSN, the Lives, the AOL.
Okay, thanks. I don't see any other questions coming in at this time. Again, still feel free to type in the questions as we wrap things up here. We can follow up with you offline for that. Either that or I guess Jenny will be getting a number of phone calls to discuss this. One of the two.
And that's okay. That's okay. We expect that, and that's what we're here for. Any questions that anybody may have, if they come in afterwards, we will send the full Q&A and the webinar follow-up email that directs people to the recording of this as well.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Next up at the U, we do have the world of content marketing, why it's the hottest trend for 2014. It's on Friday, January 24th from 2 to 3 Eastern. And the content leader is Mitchell Beer. He's the president of Smarter Shift. So that's going to be a really good webinar. Don't want to miss that. It does allow you to get a CAE credit. 1 hour may be earned for participation in that live webinar. So that registration link is in here as well. And thank you very much. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me via email or my Twitter feed at HighRoadJenny. And there are additional references and resources for you to do research here, and then as well as Melissa Fitzgerald from Gryfund. Contact information is here. So if you need it, thank you for joining me, and have a great Friday.
Great. And thank you, everyone, for your participation in today's webinar, The U, What You Need to Know About the Canadian Anti-Spam Law. And a special thank you to our speaker, Jenny Lassi. If you have any additional questions or comments, you can also email us at support@highroadsolution.com. Today's session was recorded, and you will receive an email within the next few business days with a link to the webinar recording, as well as any written answers to the questions that have come in after the fact. Today's webinar is copyright by HighRoad Solution with all rights reserved.